about the way that, I do try to consider myself to be a good ally. But although, because I'm white, there are going to be experiences that I will never understand, no matter how much I may empathize with someone. One thing I try to tell people, or I hear all the time, is that there's multiple lanes in the revolution, and this is kind of my lane, like this very left leaning, hey, white people, you can use people's proper pronouns and you can advocate for gender equality or transgender equality and social freedoms without compromising your redneckness and your hillbilliness. And that's something that has been really important to me. And I was making a joke about how controversial it can be, but if you go far enough left, you even get your guns back, because a lot of leftists are very, very staunch 2A Second Amendment activists. And so there's a broad spectrum. And I find that the further left you go, the more you get in touch with those working class roots. At least that was the case for me. So that has been a really important discovery for myself, because I think as white people, I don't know, we don't have a lot of shared culture that we can come together around that is not terrible. And this is sort of one example of a way that we can find something that's positive and share that and unify around it.
What do you see right now are possible like challenges for getting this narrative out there?
Well, I think the challenge in getting this narrative out, it's less about getting the narrative out there, because if a poor white person can be published in the New York Times, to me, that says that the distribution of the narrative is not the problem. Whether or not people listen to it and internalize it and act on it is the problem. I will say, I think people are really hungry for this kind of conversation. There was Hillbilly Elegy, which this piece was not written, like this essay was not written as a response to Hillbilly Elegy, although I'm coming to understand that some people think of it that way, which is fine. I'm pleased if that's, if that.
For folks that don't know, what's Hillbilly Elegy?
That's a good point. So Hillbilly Elegy is a 2016 memoir that was turned into a Netflix adaptation. It's by J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is not my enemy, although Hillbilly Elegy did not necessarily get a positive reception. There's a lot of people that don't like Hillbilly Elegy because he is, to the best of my knowledge, a venture capitalist, and he doesn't live in Appalachia. So it's kind of hard to posit yourself as a hillbilly representative. And I think people saw this essay as my essay as an alternative to that. It's not what I wrote it as, but like I said, I can't control it once it's out of my hands. So if people see it that way, I'm pleased. But I think people are hungry for this kind of conversation. If you look at the last week with the Britney documentary that just came out, people really want to, I think, recontextualize history in a way that makes more sense and fits with our current set of social beliefs. That's why we're like, hey, actually it was Free Britney this whole time. It's very similar for rednecks. There's a lot of history we could go back and look on and take some lessons that still apply today that maybe at the time, like you were saying, I mean, the coal companies were in control of the miners' narratives for decades. So of course their story hasn't been told, because it literally has not been allowed to be in textbooks. And when you have coal company donors and executives sitting on university boards, how could you expect the right narrative to be told? I think that's changing, but whether or not people do something about it once they learn the truth is, I think, the biggest obstacle.
Right. Just because such people are on those boards doesn't mean that those stories can't get told. Just, we just have to make sure they do.
Yeah, absolutely. The more I dig, the worse it gets, and talking to some experts in the coal mining industry and in that community. I mean, I never would have imagined that coal company industry, big, like high ticket, high rollers are sitting on university boards. Maybe that's my own naivete, but I'm coming to learn that I think I've been calling it the redneck revolution in my head, and I think there's a real need for it. And I'm hoping that we can make it happen.
Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity to do so. I'm hearing talks about what the administration is thinking when it comes to environmental policy, a lot about clearing land for a bunch of solar panels and for a lot more wind farms. And I think contextualizing this redneck revolution within that, so people can like fully make the transition from thinking that the coal industry had their best interest into just something new.
Yeah. I mean, when we were, we're doing our thing out there, we were basically, I mean, a lot of us had read about a bunch of stuff, but seeing it live and in your face is what brought the context into play really for us. Is like when you see, we're on the Virginia-Kentucky border. You can see that on the Virginia side where they're doing mountaintop removal.
Yeah.
You can see the devastation. From the Kentucky side where they're not doing it, and where they're lobbying hard to start doing the mountaintop removal in on the Kentucky side, just for the sheer fact of getting more coal out, but not giving credence to the fact that destroys the water table for everybody that lives below that. And the fact that it's being lobbied heavily for on the pro side of mountaintop removal by people who don't even live there. Like these companies, the people who run these companies do not live in the places where the coal mines are. They don't live where the coal is. They live where the money is. So they don't care about what happens to these people. The fat cat and who's sitting on the board somewhere making these decisions doesn't care about what happens to a coal miner with black lung with no insurance.
Right. And then, I think coming from a lot of us, the East Coast, we hear about a lot of these things, and kind of the basic version we hear is, oh, this, environmental impact, bad, mountaintop removal, bad, simple stuff, shut it down. We're against it. We're against it because it's bad. And then you go and you visit and you talk to some of the people, and obviously all that stuff is true. And at the same time, then you hear, their perspective might be more like, well, yeah, I mean, it's bad, but like, then if the EPA comes in and shuts the mine down, I mean, the mine's shut down. So what do we do?
How do I eat?
Yeah, I mean, that's my job. That's the job. That's the only job. And so to Pharaoh's point, I think then it becomes a little bit more complex than like, pro or con. And we really need to be thinking, especially in those like single economy communities, thinking more about giving people options, which I think is kind of, like culturally what you're saying, Abby Lee. Similarly, you want to give people economic opportunities and, train them and allow them to, go in directions for like tech jobs and things. But just, I think giving people more opportunity, it feels like there's a lot of desperation, right? Yeah. And I hate to bring it back to this, but like, reading more and more about just this epidemic of deaths of despair, like that's just a terrible thing, right? The idea that we have a category of deaths of despair, and that's going up, and it's going up in certain groups, right? And just that idea, like we, when we're talking about a lot of these cultural groups, I think that's something that really needs to be central, whether we're talking about like a heroin or an opioid epidemic, or economic blight, or any of this stuff. It's serious, real stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of those deaths of despair are happening in places where they're essentially monocultures, where the entire economy of a region is dictated by one industry.
Right, and if the industry is good, then great.
You see it, the same thing in steel country.
Sure.
I like what you brought up about black lung, because I think that is a pandemic on its own that people don't even know is happening. And I'm still doing more reporting on coal mining, so this is an area that I'm moving into. I don't know as much about it right now, but I spoke with a miner last week. We're working on some stories together, and at 75, she's outlived everybody else in her family. She's the oldest person in her family. And I can imagine, to Pharaoh's point about, bringing in panels and wind farms, if you offered a coal miner a job on a solar farm, I cannot imagine a situation in which they would not be ecstatic to take it, because black lung is killing them. Their jobs are killing them, and no one cares less than the elected officials who, I mean, in Kentucky, how often do we hear Mitch McConnell talk about, coal miner this and coal that, and I mean, he's winning elections on their votes, and yet he cares nothing about making sure that there's more than 2 doctors. The last reporting I read, there's 2 doctors in the state of Kentucky that can diagnose black lung. And guess who they work for? The coal companies.
Right.
So I cannot imagine a situation in which you would ever offer a miner a job in a new industry that's safer, and not only for them, but for their families, because you're bringing that coal dust home. Like, I can't imagine them turning that down.
Abilene, have you seen that whole Eat Shit Bob campaign that John Oliver was doing?
No, what is this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So John Oliver
tonight, folks.
We tried. John Oliver.
Fuck it.
That's what it's called.
John Oliver was basically tearing apart this coal tycoon's business, Bob Murray, and apparently he was doing this program where if workers, I think if they worked overtime or if they were able to bring in more coal during a shift, they'd get paid extra. So
yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. Some checks would show up like 18 cents extra, and some guy wrote on the back of his check, just sent it back, and it's just Eat Shit Bob. And John Oliver, of course, turned it into a whole theatrical production. And he was sued for it, but it was just a slap suit. But if you haven't seen it yet,
he made it into a musical.
Yeah,
Slap suit stuff is great.
Yeah,
I like John Oliver. I just don't have cable, so
Well, it's on YouTube.
Okay, I'm gonna go look it up after this and watch it. Maybe that will be my Friday night entertainment. Can I ask you guys a question?
Go for it. Sure.
Okay.
I wonder, like in thinking about bringing together different groups of diverse people, one thing that really struck me in one of our interviews, I'm trying to remember the exact quote. My journalist brain wants it verbatim, but it was something along the lines of, you know, you guys are at a show and there's this lady in like an American flag shirt and she's dancing, and then there are also like black people there who are dancing, and you wouldn't necessarily imagine those 2 groups together. Is that something that you experience when you're talking about performing in coal country in West Virginia and Kentucky? Does that experience change as you go throughout the country? I guess what I'm asking is, in redneck country, is the experience in your audiences and at your performances different? Like, what's the vibe like? And how
Lexington was like, we had a pretty diverse crowd in Lexington.
I mean, our crowds are pretty diverse just about everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not just like black or white with our crowds. There's like weird people in our crowd.
And like kids and grandparents.
If you're not black or white, you're weird. Weird. Those weird tan people. Hell are they?
Black, white, and weird.
Well, yeah, we have a pretty diverse crowd demographically when you're talking about race, ethnicity, age, even. And you know, the proportions vary based upon, you know, the makeup of the region.
Yes.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of our music and the message, there's, you know, people feel comfortable kicking it with each other, even though on the surface, just looking at that crowd of people before it starts, you wouldn't imagine them all partying together.
I'll give you an example.
But real quick, keeping it a buck, I mean, there are mad places where we definitely play Count the Brown People. Like mad spots.
Like festivals in particular, right? Because festivals, I think it's a question of like access, cultural access too. It's not like people can't afford to go to a festival, but it's not that they can't afford it. It's like a lot of these festivals, black people do not know about. Like our son and I definitely did not know about most of these festivals that we played.
Nah, bro.
Hey,
no idea.
And the same with Pharaoh. Before we started touring nationally and internationally, we go to these places and we would start down a road and we was like wondering if we were about to get kidnapped.
So this is it.
Because we don't see anything, and then it's like not a soul, and then all of a sudden you cut through some bushes and then just thousands of people.
Thousands of white people.
Right, and you just like, and we look at each other, and I said it to our son once. I was like, "Yo, they've been keeping this a secret from us."
For real.
And I don't know how intentional that is, honestly, but there was some European country where somebody came up to you and took a picture of the 2 of you, and you were just like, "Do you know who we are?" And they were like, "I mean, You got to be famous.
You
right?
got to be famous, right?
By the way,
That was in the
happened-
Czech Republic, I think.
That happened to me while I was walking around in Turkey. Some guy was just like, "Hey, come on, let's take a picture."
You're someone famous. You must be.
Never seen black
That
people.
happens to us in the States too, but
Yeah,
Might
don't
have
get it
seen him,
twisted.
but it was just statistically like you being here. You have to be a famous person because
Right.
why else would you be here?
Yeah, why else would you be here?
That was the logic.
But we do get the chance to play in some places where people have not had experiences with black people before.
right.
And, I hate to say sometimes it kind of shows, and it can be awkward and everything, but like they're well-meaning, and it's such a good opportunity for us to be there and be like, oh, you like this, like, let's hang out, like, we'll be cool, we'll talk real with people and get a chance to do that. So yeah, we play some crowds. We go to such different places, and sometimes it's the crowd in the same show, and sometimes it's one crowd one night and such a different crowd the next night.
Yeah.
And thinking about how we've just played for both of these audiences. And another thing that Gangstagrass has really put in our face that I think we try to share with everybody is how much things aren't as as divided as we may think, because a lot of the crowds we play, if we're playing in Brooklyn, there's a bunch of Kentucky and Tennessee transplants in the crowd. And and when we play in Louisville or Texas or something, that we'll play in a crowd and it won't be some stereotypical hit crowd, right? And we've been given this image of America, and I think sometimes a bit intentionally we've been given this image that there's these two things, like you're either rural or you're urban, right? And you're gonna be this or you're gonna be that, and
never the twain shall meet.
Yeah, and it ignores how much blending there has been and how many people have sort of gone between those and found the connections between them. And that's one of the things that I really love about the conversation that things like this article bring up, is kind of expanding the image, that it's not just this one narrow definition of being rural or being urban, that there's people within either of those that have all kinds of things in common and go from one to the other and can really have a much more complicated relationship.
Yeah, again, I say good. At least a little more than half of the people in those quote unquote urban settings came from somewhere rural.
And honestly,
myself included.
I'm a urban kid that grew up in a very Midwestern town that lives in a city that's country at heart.
Y'all know I'm country as hell. I got greens growing in the backyard right now.
I want to mention one crowd though, just really quick. I have to mention Salt Lake City, just because we played there, and it was every ex-Mormon or like non-Mormon, just like all 50 of them. all came out to our show, and then we had a little basement party afterwards
with DJ Street Jesus.
Yeah, man.
And the thing is that with DJ Street Jesus, our son and I got to kick it with him in Amsterdam.
Like several years later, just randomly.
He's the one that put us on stage with Wake Self.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. You were.
We saw all the freaky side of Salt
Lake City.
That's right.
Yeah, actually, Salt Lake City was the time when our son and I were the black people in town.
Yeah, that was it. It was just us.
We saw nobody else.
Yeah, we went on a couple of walks too. And it was like we went on a drive to the comic book store, and we went all over.
We saw three Tongans.
Yeah,
and a Samoan, but no black people.
There was the one light skinned John that was there. That was at the show.
She was Puerto Rican.
No, she was mixed. Because Jimmy King was hanging out with her girl.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we're getting sidetracked, but sorry, Abby, you were going to say something.
Sorry.
Oh, I think when you were talking about, well, first of all, let me just say two thoughts. I'm gathering my thoughts. We were talking about how it's not necessarily always rural and urban. And obviously I lived in Chicago. That's where I got my journalism degree. people there could never figure out where I was from. At the time, my hair was mostly buzzed, like on the sides. I was doing the Miley Cyrus thing. And so I think they thought I was European, and I got German and Australian a lot. And I was like, have you ever heard a Southern person talk? Because I don't sound like either of those. And then the other
German.
yeah,
right?
Definitely not Australian.
I look like a redneck. And so I think they were
That's
like,
hilarious.
the voice and the aesthetic wasn't matching up, and it still doesn't. Like, I have a very like edgy, like I like, you know, tattoos and whatever. Anyway, so people think that I'm not a redneck, and then they hear me. And that was the thing. I was doing this podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's called the Sunrise Movement. It's part of the Tennessee Holler.
Oh man, they're trying to get me to be in the Sunrise Movement around Baltimore.
That was my first experience with them, and it was a lot of fun. I was on the climate justice part, and we were talking about how the insurrection and what came after was going to affect climate justice. You did interview with them?
No. I've just talked to a couple of members, and like their meetings are on my radar. But it's a national group that's seemed to become national really quickly. So I'm always wary of that stuff.
Yeah, I was really glad that they reached out to me. It was about this story that we did about basically finding local people from Tennessee who were at the riot. But anyways, when I went into that podcast, I was like, okay, professional voice turned on, and y'all, I really thought that I had like got rid of my accent for this podcast, or at least like I really thought that it was going to be less. And I went back and listened to it, and I was like, oh, because I when I hear myself talk, I don't hear my accent, but then I talk to other people and they're like, oh yeah. But anyway, the other thing about not being necessarily rural or urban is that a lot of people who live in Chicago, at least their parents or great grandparents or their grandparents are from Appalachia, because they left the coal mines or they left the steel factories. And so I think it's really interesting that they're often in those places, like you guys were saying, you know, when you play in Brooklyn, there's transplants from Appalachia. And just like when I lived in Chicago, there were people whose families were from Appalachia or the South because they left to find job opportunity. So that was all that I wanted to say about that. I was just
There's so many.
Chicago is
DC
like that. Chicago's like that. I mean, like that's the reason why, like, us on the golf course, there's a huge connection between us and the Chicago folks, because a lot of them came from Mississippi, New Orleans, which is why if you go in the black neighborhoods, they sound country. They sound like they're from Mississippi.
Say what you will about Bill Monroe, but I mean, he worked and lived in Chicago for some time as well. So there's a pipeline. And
That ain't no part of nothing.
You what?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, I have feelings about Bill Monroe that I shall keep to myself for this moment, but I'm sure you can imagine what they are. Anyways,
You've written about him, I mean, a little bit, but
yeah.
but to your point though, I mean, I think that's something central to bluegrass, and also I think central to a lot of the American black experience too, is this idea of migration to cities, right? So bluegrass as a genre, to me, like the difference between old time music and bluegrass is the old time is actually like in the hills, and then bluegrass takes that music, but like it's about the hills, it's about Appalachia and everything, but it's played from like a microphone on a stage in a city, like on a radio or on a recording or something with amplification. Like bluegrass is in the city. Like Bill Monroe is in Chicago, but singing about I'm going back to old Kentucky, because he's not in Kentucky, and that's really central. I think that's central to the migration in black culture too. Yeah.
I was just like,
I gotta say,
that's good.
I'm sorry.
Good.
Now, since you're with us, I've gotta ask, like, where is your mind nowadays? What other projects are you getting into, and what movements are you keeping a close eye on?
Oh, thank you for asking about that. Yeah, so in terms of what's coming next, I just got an email the other day that Sewanee, the University of the South, would like me to come and give, I guess, a symposium or like a presentation on a subject, and I've decided that the working title is, recontextualizing radical redneck history. And I have also, I'm putting together a book proposal about the same thing. I'm very, very lucky. I just sent out a tweet. I was like, hey, y'all are asking if I have an agent. No, I don't. Slide into my DMs. And then like 6 agents did. So,
How you doing?
yeah,
Hey, what's up, yo?
One of them was the University of West Virginia Press, which also published. If you read the New York Times article, one of my sources is Charles Keeney, and he wrote the book Road to Blair Mountain. It should be out, I think, either this month or next. I pre-ordered it a long time ago. But anyways, they reached out to me and asked if I would consider sending them a book proposal. So nothing is really happening yet, but that's my next project, is to really take this essay, expand upon it, find other examples of redneck history. Another example off the top of my head is like the Battle of Athens, Tennessee, not Greece.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, after World War II, this didn't just happen in Athens, it happened in a lot of places, but some GIs came home and they found a corrupt government, and they were like, okay, we're going to lay siege to the sheriff's office to make sure that the election is held properly. And they knew that the sheriff was trying to rig the election, so they took their guns and they went down to the sheriff's office and said, you ain't leaving with those ballot boxes.
So is this like a they're not being sore losers type of Confederate soldiers coming back home to Athens?
No. This was in 46.
Oh,
this is
okay.
World War II.
Come back from World War II.
Okay.
They were coming back from Europe and fighting in World War II. And basically when they got back, the sheriff had been rigging the elections while they were gone, and also putting their family members in jail for no reason. And they roughed up a couple of the GIs who were like drunk, and basically the sheriff's department, trumped up their charges so that they could bleed them out of all their cash. Just stuff like that, and they had enough. And there was a rash of that after World War II, to the best of my knowledge, in the South. Kind of like, when the cat's away, the mice will play type of thing.
You're really outlining a narrative for like a prouder history of masculinity for
Maybe so.
like white men, instead of this Proud Boys bullshit that they're in.
Yeah, listen.
Really interesting way to look at it. I mean, do you feel?
I don't know. It's more of a. I don't know. I say it as more of a prouder history of working class solidarity.
For that too.
I think you're right, and it always behooves the man for working class people to be separated. But like, why do you think that some of the poorest black and white households make cornbread the same way? Because we have learned to survive, and we've learned to get by, and we do have a shared culture. I think it's not that we've forgotten it, we've been propagandized out of it. So I look forward to writing more about it.
And at the end of the day, good cornbread is just good cornbread.
Especially if it has cracklings in it. So.
Well, I'll pass on the cracklings, but I will put it in my cast iron skillet.
Yes.
Cast iron, yes. Cracklings, also yes.
Yeah.
No, mostly I don't do the pork, but
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of the song Willie and Laura.
Chicken
McNeil.
cracklings, bro.
yeah, that's true. That we do have chicken cracklings.
Chicken cracklings. Let's get it popping.
I was going to say, if you don't know what cracklings are, chitlins are the intestines, cracklings are the skin off of
Yeah,
pork, and
it's-
it's deep fried. So they're
Yeah,
Already
it was a common snack back home.
Yeah,
if you go to the what I guess the southern equivalent to the bodega is the corner store.
Yeah,
and they would have the cracklings right next to the pig feet and the pickle jar.
There's I don't know if it's still operating, but anyway, in my hometown, there was a store that sold scrambled eggs and pork brains, canned. I don't know what factory canned that, but that's where I'm from. So
In the same can?
In a can.
yeah, because that's how you would cook pork brains.
Yeah.
Scrambled with eggs, and they just canned it and sold it. So
Word. I mean, we got all these extra cans. It's just
Might as well fill them with something.
put some brains in these joints. Like, what? Why not?
what about y'all? I know that you put out some new music recently. Do you have anything coming up?
Oh yeah.
We got some stuff cooking. We just ain't gonna talk about it till it's ready.
Well, keep me on your press list.
Oh, sure.
Although
Always.
actually, right now we're just putting the finishing touches on a song for Pi Day.
Yep.
So that can be out in time for March 14th.
I think that's so important because Dan said something earlier that stuck with me, which was about, bluegrass in the city being about going back home and like being about the hills. And I like what you guys do because I do think the themes of bluegrass need to be updated. Like singing about Little Cabin Home on the Hill is not necessarily going to resonate with a lot of people. And I think that's why like Never Go Home Again and some of your other singles like Barn Burnin', like I think a lot of those are so relevant because it's the music, but the themes are updated. And I mean, I like keeping up with you guys and I like your music. And that's one of the reasons because I really think bluegrass needs to, like, we got to stop talking about the cabin and we got to start talking about things that are happening now. In my opinion.
Hey, ain't that the truth?
Yeah, more mathematical themes in the bluegrass is not absolutely necessary.
We are definitely starting to do some songs about all kinds of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I've heard some of I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but some of the things that you've sent me that I think they were yours and not Gangstagrass's, but they were very good. I'm trying to say it without saying it because it has like adult themes.
No, that's okay. We've already broken the seal on that.
Yeah, we had a
You
whole
can say whatever the fuck you want.
It's after
Sorry,
10. It's after 10 o'clock. You can get it to it.
Yeah. Bye, Larry.
Larry went to bed.
I've tried not to say any cuss words because I was like, I don't know if they allow that shit or not. So
Larry D.
We're okay.
Listen, I'm over here. There's a hole in my tongue for me biting it. So now, fuck it.
Johnny Cash said, you can't say things like shit or damn.
I got a funny detour because I kind of want to ask you more about this sunrise movement stuff because I was thinking about talking to the chapter here. What do you think about them, man? What was that interview about? Because they popped up. It seemed like they popped up right after the election. Maybe they were around before, but.
And explain what you're talking about for those
I have to
who are
Google
not
this.
familiar.
What are we talking about here?
All right, so there's a direct action group called the Sunrise Movement. It's mostly seems to be younger folks doing some pretty good actions in terms of like doing civil disobedience, going in and bird dogging politicians, which means asking them hard questions and really pressing them on things, going to their offices, occupying offices and saying, you need to deal with climate because like it's real and it's here. And if you're not doing something about it, that's bullshit. So, and they've gone in and gotten in people's faces about it, politicians' faces and corporations' faces, which they seem like they're doing pretty well to me. They seem like a group that read This Is an Uprising.
Which is a book that Ryan just talked a lot about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you gave that context, Wrench, because first of all, I'm also sorry. My glasses are new and they're too tight, so I've reached the point where I have to put them up on my head because they my noggin. So I'm sorry if there's that picture of Newt Gingrich and his glasses are like fucked up. Anyways, yeah, I'm glad you gave that context because the first contact I had with the Sunrise Movement was after they read the piece I wrote with my co-writer Matt Baston about the Tennesseans who were at the DC riot. And they're also connected to the Tennessee Holler, which is, there's like different hollers. They're not a publication, they're just a media outlet. So they publish a variety of things and they're very active on Twitter. So through that Tennessee Holler network, the Sunrise Movement reached out to us and asked us to do the interview because they wanted to talk about democratic changes that we think should be happening and how interconnected climate change legislation and other democratic changes, like making sure that voting is easier, a la Stacey Abrams, and trying to continue her work on a national scale, and how that would affect climate justice. So that episode that we did was not about climate justice per se, because that's something I care about, but it's just not my area of expertise.
Come on, y'all.
All right, welcome Hammer Swing Games.
That happens every now and then.
Hammers win games. Hammers win games. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hello.
It's dark.
Welcome.
I forgot about stream notifications, and I was like, whoa. Like, what's happening?
You know how it is.
Sorry, not to detour from your thought there.
Oh,
Please continue.
that was basically it. I was glad Branch brought that up because I'm not an expert on their movement. I just know what they wanted to talk to us about, which was, how do we protect our democracy so that we can make effective climate change. And I got to hand it to Gen Z. If there's one thing that they understand very well, is that if we don't do something quick, fast, and in a hurry, it's the creeks really will rise. I was trying to make a joke there, but I got tongue tied. Anyway, they really understand that they're inheriting a big problem.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily Gen Z that the podcast host I don't think is Gen Z, but I just think that it's indicative of a great hunger for that movement.
Which, if I could just explain that for a second, I think what you're referring to is a popular saying of when somebody says, well, God willing and the creek don't rise,
Yep.
which is to say, well, if things all go according to my best wishes, then I suppose it'll turn out that way. But when you say God willing and the creek don't rise, you're saying the creek actually will rise because climate
Rising now.
is
Yeah.
in fact changing, and so
Literally.
you can't just emptily wish on that because it's actually happening. So you might as well do
It
something
is
about it.
actively rising, and it's a very large creek. So that
Yeah.
yes, I'm
Can I-
glad you got my joke.
No, I love it. And I like that kind of reference. But I want to hone in on something you just mentioned, which is, and I just Googled this, you mentioned the Tennessee holler, and then you said there's multiples of these, which it looks like it's just like some sort of a digital media, I don't know, talk space or something. But just that's so exciting to me to find out about. I don't know why that really appeals to me, but the idea of
So the Nuga holler, the Tennessee holler, I think there's a Clarksville holler. There's different ones that are in each sort of, and basically it's hollering about XYZ, hollering about politics, basically.
Yeah, shout out to Chattanooga.
Nuga.
Yeah,
There's so many little, there's so many little like things that you can come across once you're actually like traveling through or in touch with rural areas that totally break down that idea where people are doing progressive things, people organizing really cool stuff. So I want to shout out to Apple Shop in Kentucky that has a radio station, WMMT, and does a bunch of community-oriented stuff. And in the 90s, they realized that the new prison construction that had been going on nearby was actually giving them a new listenership, which was the inmates, which many of whom were being basically shipped to the prison from urban areas north of
Right.
there. So they started including some radio programming for the inmates as well. Started a program called Holler to the Hood, and
Hood to the holler.
Hood to the Holler.
I think so.
There's two different organizations.
Oh, there's two different. My bad.
This was like a radio show called Holler to the Hood, I think, and they would also use the radio program as a call-in program because the inmates' phone time was limited and they could only do certain things, but they could call into the radio program, leave a message for family that could all tune in and hear these messages going out. So it's called like the 1,000 Kites program that they have
That's
on.
pretty dope.
Yeah.
So they were doing a lot of really cool stuff there, and word up on that.
Yeah,
really interesting.
you're right. I mean, there are so many small organizations that are doing such good work, and I think it's so what's the word? Not demoralizing, but it's just dismissive. I see a lot of jokes about Southern people being inbred, and I see a lot of jokes about us being uneducated or just etc. The list goes on, especially on TikTok, surprisingly. Anytime a conservative person posts a TikTok, and I mean, most of those TikToks are shitty, but it's true. But it's always, oh, look at this inbred looking person. And it doesn't sit right with me because of what you're talking about. There actually are really hardworking organizers in the South. Again, hello, Stacey Abrams, delivered our democracy. She shouldn't have had to. Black women shouldn't have to continue to save our country, but they do. So thank you, Stacey Abrams, for that. But when you make jokes about the South, you're inevitably making jokes about some of the blackest and most diverse cities in our country. Do you think that Atlanta is full of white inbred people? Because that's not the case. And like you said, the organizations that Stacey Abrams has started and worked with are just another example of the ones in the South that are working real hard to try and keep our country from falling apart.
Or DC, which I like to mention, a southern city.
Yeah.
It's on the border there, but it's a southern
Yeah.
city.
I think a lot of folks don't get hip to the fact, like, a lot of Southerners are in DC. It is a southern
city with northern charm.
To be honest, is like, I consider anything south of Wilmington, Delaware, to be south.
Well, that's right. If we're doing Mason-Dixon line, even Wilmington is technically south.
Yep. What about South Philly?
Nah, bro.
Only my block.
Only your block, and because of you.
Although there is the Pennsylvania phenomenon, which is just a whole other.
It's true, but I think there we start to get.
But that's not really the southern thing. That's just the fact that the thing is that quote unquote redneck culture, not in the classical definition of the semi-leftist.
Right, in the modern definition of
more
redneck.
like the modern definition of redneck is most of the United States, regardless of proximity or northernness or southernness of the Mason-Dixon line. There are rednecks in Maine, Vermont.
Definitely Vermont.
I think it's part of that propaganda redefinition to say, rural people, you get to have this identity as contrasted with those urban folks, which is how you get rural people in Oregon that identify with the Confederate flag, which was not anywhere near Oregon.
Yeah, wait, what?
But it's become a symbol, rural culture is all this one thing, and it's a total fallacy.
Right. And I like too, though, you're mentioning Pennsylvania. This is something that I've really loved noticing, is that I don't think that states really have nearly as clearly defined and distinct definitions and cultures as regions, and the border regions, the border between say, I don't know, Pennsylvania, and does Pennsylvania share a border with Kentucky?
Yes, I think so. No, really? Kentucky has so many borders with so many states. I can't even recall which ones it touches. I guess
maybe
not.
it might hit that somewhere in that little bottom corner there.
Well, the thing is the culture. I think what he's trying to say is the cultural groupings ignore political boundaries as far as state lines are concerned.
Right. The state line, unless it's a geographical line, like a river or a mountain range line, and even then, what difference does it make necessarily if you're on one side of the mountain range or the other side of the mountain range? Certainly there are historical, feuds and divides and things, but ultimately, culturally, you probably have a lot more in common. You're all mountain people, or you're all lake people, or wherever it is.
Yeah, but stuff like mountains, topographical differences do actually cause huge cultural changes.
To remind people, as Pharaoh has pointed out, there's mountain people, there's lake people, and there's weird people.
Yes.
The three kinds of people, as we all know.
But while it's on my mind, Abby, there's and while we're talking about juxtapositions, for whatever you're digging into down the line, I think there's I like to bring things back to Nebraska. There's a really great juxtaposition between a politician, John DeCamp, and another one, Ernie Chambers. Ernie Chambers being the head of the Black community, and John DeCamp being the head of the rural community of Nebraska. But the juxtaposition is nice because they do come to a lot of agreements, and they do see eye to eye on a lot of things. And as you're looking and digging deeper into redneck culture, maybe that might be something for you.
Plus, Pharaoh just learned the word juxtaposition and wants to use it as many times as possible.
Come on now. Come on.
This dictionary over here, bananas. There's so many words in it.
I'm just messing with you, babe.
It's great.
While we're learning things, maybe this was what Dan was about to do too, but for the sake of accuracy, because we care about this, the 7 states that border Kentucky are Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Tennessee.
That's right. And so in between Pennsylvania and Kentucky
Is West
specifically,
Virginia.
you got West Virginia and Ohio.
And Ohio, yes.
All of southern Ohio. When you want to talk about Pennsyltucky, southern Ohio is Pennsyltucky, okay? And that's one of those regions that I was really thinking of, is like that like northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, that like Cincinnati, like Newport, Covington, you know, like where they got the chili.
Yeah.
Look, what I'm trying to say is that franchise chain restaurant maps are really where I define America. It's like, do you have a Skyline Chili? Do you have a Steak and Shake? Do you have a In-N-Out Burger? Do you have
In-N-Out
do you
Burger.
have good bagels? Do you have good donuts? Both, neither.
But you can
If you
see,
don't have Wawa, get your shit together.
but like central PA towards southern towards southern Ohio, you get that Pennsyltucky. A lot of it can be mapped out dialectically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's cat sharing time, guys.
You listen to
I
the
apologize.
accents.
We'll hear that.
For Kitty.
Say hello.
I want cat filters for Zoom that like give cats hats and little like clown noses and little beards and mustaches.
You know who doesn't want that?
Cats.
Cats.
No, but
put
it'd be
a- you
filter.
put a hat
don't
on a
have to
cat.
Actually, put it on them.
Putting a hat on a cat is a quick way to see them walk backwards for 2 hours.
My hedgehog is awake, but she is in her cage. So
Oh, I forgot you have a hedgehog.
Yeah.
Oh,
her name's Noodle. She's a shit, and I love her so much.
oh God, I forgot you had a hedgehog. Why'd you have to remind me? And now I want to see it.
Fun fact: they're not as fast as they are on the cartoons.
Boo.
Hey, you know what? They are not.
They don't have to be though.
They're considerably less blue as well.
They could
Yeah.
they could just sit
Well,
there.
But-
Noodle's
But
albino.
for some reason, if one hits you, gold coins do come out.
Facts. Facts.
I'll tell you a fact. I was talking to a custom Western boot designer that we all know in the band, and I was talking to her and I was just like, could you design me some custom boots? Like, what would that look like? And she was like, sure. What do you want them to look like? And I was just like, are you familiar with Sonic the Hedgehog?
Dan, you would look so fucking good in those moves.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Everyone be quiet now.
Kids.
Everyone, no talking.
She's grumpy because the light is on, so I got some of her chicken treat. I don't know if I opened it properly.
I'm gonna
That's
take a
so cute.
screenshot so my son can see this.
She's
That's so cute.
they're nocturnal, so that's why she's like.
Just woke up. What's going on here?
This is basically Go-Gurt, but it's made of chicken, and so it's her favorite.
Chicken Go-Gurt.
Chicken Go-Gurt.
My favorite.
Chicken Go-Gurt. You had me.
Right? Wait, hold on a second.
Oh.
They don't have that for like grown men, do they?
That's
Trying to get
adorable.
Get some chicken Go-Gurt right now.
Chicken and cornstarch and water. You could eat it if you really wanted to.
By the way, Banjo, I do imagine those are the noises and faces you make whenever your baby does anything cute.
Oh
No man, I am not this into my own child.
Yeah, all right, but does he eat chicken Go-Gurts?
Hold on.
No.
Wait, stop. I just noticed in the mirror on the wall behind you, there is a hedgehog.
Is that a hedgehog calendar?
That's awesome.
That is,
Oh.
It's a
you got it.
Sale.
Oh my god.
By the way, art for sale, everybody in the Gangstagrass fam.
Oh, this is too much.
See, the other one's the like the interpretive. Oh no, you can't. There's art below. So I painted that, and then below it, there's two small canvases that she painted with her feet.
Aw.
Oh, that hurt. That
You
was
have-
so cute. It hurt.
So what you're saying is you have a hedgehog painting and a hedgehog painting.
I don't know if you
What?
can tell, but I'm single.
You have a wonderful hedgehog in your life. I mean, that's good.
I got it.
Talking my cat, and they're my kids, and here comes Tom. So both of them are special needs. Noodle is albino, and she has tumors. She has cancer, and she's already had them removed twice, so we probably won't be doing it again. So we're moving into end of life care. And then Tom, here you come, is old enough to have his driver's license, and
Oh.
so this leg got shot off by a dirty human, and he lived in the shelter for a decade. So
Who's got that kind of time?
Have you had him?
apparently,
No, I mean to shoot cats. Like who's that
Oh,
guy?
right.
Carol, and I guess probably some.
Who's that dude?
You know how people are. They were like, "Get that fucking cat out of here," and they shot him, and he lost his leg, and you know, now he went from like hunting and eating birds to this. So he's his masculinity is gone, I think. So, yeah.
He's exploring new forms of masculinity. He's
He is.
growing into it.
It's a very sweet and good boy, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, but he appears in almost all my videos because he comes over and he's like, "Excuse me, hello." We are about me right now.
Son.
I also have the urge to show off my significant other in the camera whenever I do Zoom calls now. Because he's always laying around. He currently is at the door. He wants to.
What's his name?
Tigre. He wants to go outside and, I don't know, play and whatnot. Give me a second, man. He meows and paws at the door a lot.
Does he know that it's like 12 degrees outside?
They
He
don't care.
does.
They're only going to be out there for 30 seconds anyway. See, they do the coming in and out and in and out. And
Plus, he's got a fur coat, you know.
Yeah, I've done that with him. He's like, I want to go outside. I'm like, all right, well, we can go outside. And he's like, okay, I'm ready to come back in. I'm like, I didn't open the door.
sometimes he likes to, so I live in an apartment right now, and we face the courtyard, and so I have like a little porch, and sometimes he'll run, like if I open the door, and he only has the 3 legs. Most of the time he limps, but when he needs to scoot it, boy, he can do it, and he'll scoot out the door in between my legs and through the porch rails, because we have a bird feeder, and he thinks that he's still got it, and then I close the door and tell him he's feral again, and then he's like, "Mom, hello." Like, as soon as he thinks he's out there, he's like, "Oh no, like, what have I done?" And I'm like, "See you later, wild boy. You live out there now." And then he,
Yeah, my guy unfortunately got his front claws removed. So
Savage.
yeah,
got him outside. Then,
yeah. So I think he tries to play with other animals. I take him to a garden up the road. He tries to play, but it's like he's used those paws on me before, and it's just cute. it just
I'm gonna get you.
Little jelly beans.
yeah.
nails, yeah. They're not like I obviously it's just like fingernails, but I trim them. And I think he's like, "Now I can't scratch." But it's because he's old as fuck and his nails break off, and I find them in the floor, and it's disgusting. So in order to prevent that, I just trim them.
Yeah, I actually just got one of my cat's nails the other day because he's older. I just adopted him last year. He's older. I'm not sure how many of those I'm about to start finding.
Yeah, it's like humans, you know. Your teeth and your nails get brittle, and his nails are just disgusting, and they break, and it's ugh, and then you step on it, and you're like, ugh. And then we don't have to deal with that problem. He's
Aw,
just a
That-
very
that
few
sound.
problems in his life.
what a sweetheart. Shout out to all the rescue animals. I just started my monthly contribution to Friends of Homeless Animals, which is a no-kill shelter out near Dulles Airport, where I got my last 2 dogs. And you know, it's a great thing to do if you can rescue animals and you have the ability and the time and the space to do that, then do that. And if you can't, there's always the option of donating to the organizations that are helping to bring animals like this into homes like Abby Lee's and Pharaoh's.
They're so good. Don't overlook the seniors. They're the best because My grandmother has a puppy, and she calls me every day, and she's like, "This dog, he's doing this and that." And the
My
other
grandmother does that too. Like, I'm trying to talk to grandma, and she's just like, "Get down from there."
I'm like, "Well, get you a 20-year-old cat, and you won't have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Never do anything ever."
That's right. That's right.
See, what's the cat doing? Chilling.
I'm in a Brooklyn neighborhood that's overrun with feral cats, and even an occasional raccoon.
Do you ever do any TNR?
Yeah, they have a lot. So most of the feral cats that I see around here, they have an ear clipped, which is what they do to mark that they've been fixed and then released again. So generally, I'm only seeing cats that have already been taken care of.
Just
I
like
don't know what TNR is.
oh, sorry.
Well,
What's
the
TNR?
N, the T stands for trap, the R stands for release,
And
Okay.
Trap, neuter, and release. And there's a journalist we were talking about earlier, like different lanes in the revolution. And one of my journalist friends does TNR and raises funds for it. She does it herself, so she'll take the cat, have it, neutered, then return it to its colony. But I think, man, I could talk about animal rights and animals all day. Do you guys know Stella, the talking dog?
Not personally.
I need to meet this dog.
She's on Instagram. Her Instagram is Hunger for Words, and her human is a speech pathologist and taught her to use buttons. And Stella is a rescue and can now put together full sentences, like "want play outside with mom." Yeah, so Stella is bright, and they're using that technique for other dogs to talk too. So it's fascinating.
All right, I'm gonna go rescue a dog and teach it to use the MPC.
yo, those beats are gonna be ridiculous.
Did you just say Did you say you're gonna make a Dilla dog? Oh! Welcome.
Shout out our fan in Knoxville, Chris Seaton. His wife runs a mobile unit for trap and release and fixing pets, and they take donations and stuff. And I know they're trying to do that good work out there of helping the animals.
So important because one cat is like 250,000 kittens or something. It's like an insane. That's not an exaggeration. It's an insane number of kittens over their lifetime. Maybe not 250,000, but.
Philly's got a big feral cat problem. I mean, and I know in South Philly, it's got to the point to where they developed their own phenotype, like they all have a long in South Philly.
They're
all
actually
of them
Philly cats.
They have. Well, they all have elongated dew claws, so they have opposable thumbs.
Oh, that got DQ Kennard. That's what did it. The dew claws, the opposable dew claws.
Opposable thumb cat.
Thank you for following us. We're following you back right now. Welcome aboard.
The word of the day. The word of the day is dew claw.
That's right. Here in Philly, we have Thundercats.
I was so underestimating it. I thought that I had overestimated. The results are exponential, with one cat having an average of 2.8 kittens per litter, creating 11,606,077 kittens within 9 years if left unchecked. That is why TNR is so important.
Wow.
That's a lot of cats, though.
That is an extreme amount of cats.
Bunnies, the joke is always that bunnies are the ones that reproduce a lot, but it really is.
But
They
wait,
do too, but the foxes get the bunnies more easily than they get the cats.
If cats started doing that, repopulating a lot, will we just start eating cats?
Oh, cats are also terrible for the environment. They're the #1 killer of birds as well.
Yeah, they kill for sport.
I should ask my buddy who wrote the Smithsonian article calling cats murder beasts. He used the word murder beast.
They really are, dude.
Yeah.
Well, that might be good, because I was just thinking we might need to start training the cats to fight feral hogs, since that's the other animal that is going to just invasively multiply and have to be dealt with.
Rich, do you know the song "There Was a Little Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly"? Do you know that song?
It's exactly the strategy I think we need to follow.
That's what Australia did. It didn't work.
They did it in Hawaii too. They brought the mongooses to eradicate the rats. and
Oops.
they never the twain shall meet because mongooses are diurnal, which is the opposite of nocturnal, which is what rats are. So now they have mongooses and also rats.
So
Yeah, they
what
did
did
try
you
that a bunch of times. Like,
I love that nobody looked that up before they just brought up. They just dropped off a whole bunch of mongoose. Like, all right, this is gonna handle the
Let's see
problem.
what happens. Let's just see what happens.
Where the mongooses at? Oh, they sleep, dog.
What
let's
did
bring
you
these
say there,
snakes in.
Abby?
Let's bring the snakes in for the cane toads. Wait,
Right.
the snakes are eating what now? Okay, let's bring in. Oh, wait a minute. All right, they just eventually just escalate to just releasing lions into the streets.
I think the place where it really works out is the flying cockroaches, and then the thing that eats the flying cockroaches is the little geckos, the cute little geckos.
Wait, here the funny thing about the flying cockroaches is, one, they're not cockroaches. Well, and two, they all can fly. It's just that some of them kind of forgot.
And good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I don't
Like
need that
really
much.
fucking great.
I don't need a palmetto bug up
The
in
thing,
here.
yeah, it's the palmetto bug that people think is a cockroach, but it's not a cockroach technically.
If you see a flying cockroach, you're looking at the chosen one.
I am from Florida. They all fly.
Yeah. Them roaches in Florida, they be out, son.
By the way, Abby, some of the stuff you're saying is getting a little bit lost in there.
No, I think I just asked Rich for clarification on the mean because I forgot how many feral hogs were supposed to be estimated to arrive in one's yard at any given.
Oh, yeah, it was like 80
That's a lot.
in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Wait, why though? Hold on. Wait.
Oh, you guys aren't up on the feral hog problem?
Yeah,
Nah,
they're going
bro.
crazy. Because the thing
Nah,
is,
bro.
thing is, you have to remember, pigs are not indigenous to North America.
Mm-hmm.
So that means they have no natural predators. And they can eat and digest just about anything.
Yeah, anything.
They cause billions of dollars of damage in crops a year.
They're also very smart. Pigs are far too smart for their
Yeah,
own
they're
good.
very smart.
Very smart.
And they're running rampant in a lot of cities now. They're running rampant in cities now, and they grow to ridiculous sizes as long as you let
Right.
them live. As long as you let them live, they will grow.
We learned, isn't it, that it's not a hog until it's 100 pounds or something like that? What is it? There's like some weight limit between
What?
a pig and a hog.
And it doesn't take them that long to get there.
Right.
And once they get to a certain level, you still call them hogs, but you spell it HAWG.
No
And
cities
then-
for these?
And then you add another couple hundred pounds. You put another G on there. So it's
So basically,
hog.
it's mostly around the Gulf Coast, I think.
Yeah.
that the population is really booming and just like invading all kinds of areas, so that it's actually a massive problem for several states that are worried about all the damage that they're doing to crops and farmland and stuff, to where then they're like, okay, well, we're going to make it fair game for people to hunt hogs, and they're not going to be protected or anything. But the thing is, then you have places that open up to be like, come here and hunt hogs, and then they like breed the hogs for that reason.
And then the hogs get loose because the hogs can do that.
And then it actually amplifies the population more. It's totally insane. And it all popped off a couple of years ago because one of the mass shootings, school shootings or something, that caused the usual spinning the wheels about the gun control debate. And Jason Isbell was posting something about the need for some sensible gun laws. And one of his fans was like, yeah, but what about these feral hogs that invade my yard, like 80 hogs in 5 minutes, swarming my daughter? Like, I need gun control.
What?
And then that's what everybody said. What? And then it turns out,
But the people, well, the thing is, people in Florida were like, yeah, what about those hogs?
Yeah, right. And then everywhere else is just like swarming your daughter. Sir, is this a thinly veiled metaphor for black people again?
Yeah, are you
But
what are
the
you
thing
talking
is that
about, Gus?
it's not just these aren't the thing is that people are thinking like they're thinking like these cute little pigs from like
Little piggies.
right.
Yeah, not
When we're
these
talking about
giant
how
murder
some
pigs.
genius decided it would be a good idea to bring these Siberian hogs because they would be cool to hunt without, thinking about, okay, what if these things multiply and they multiply rapidly? and they grow to enormous size. Like it's like something out of a science fiction novel.
So to bring it back full circle, I think rednecks can really find their flag here. They can really start working for social justice causes, and like also like bringing guns on board too, getting rid of feral hogs.
Right. And shout out to all the chat going on the Twitch stream right now, which is about eating feral hogs. So people are comparing their experiences with having eaten hogs and whatnot.
You know,
Yeah, and barbecue brings people together.
You're right. Okay, all right.
I just want to give you guys another example, because one of the things that is missing in my life is the giant African land snail, also known as the gal. And thanks to Florida, like many things, they are illegal because someone released, or, you know, people, they get these pets, they don't know how to take care of them, they let them go. And there are a lot of wild roving gals in Florida, and you cannot salt them, like they don't die and they eat everything. But they're so cute. They're like,
don't die.
They're this big, and they're snake, and they have, it looks like they have bunny ears. Their skulks are so big. And I desperately want one, but it's similar to the feral hog situation. They're illegal.
Yeah. What you do is
They don't die.
No. Well, there's a way to kill them. It depends on how. Well, you have to use cheap beer to do it. You use cheap beer. You know, don't use your good beer.
Tough crowd.
Get get yourself a case of Natty Light and pour it in a punch bowl, and put the bowl in the ground up to the edge.
Yes, this is what I do. You're describing my Saturday night. Go on. So in the bowl.
This is not for you, Dan. Do not drink this beer.
Okay, you put it in the bowl, and then what? And then what?
The snails drink the beer, then eventually they dehydrate and drown themselves.
So maybe so. I personally think my escargot joke was a more viable option. But we can have a plan B.
I mean, then you get a snail DUI.
But they never speed.
I'm really liking our American version of escargot. Like, serve that up to the French. Like, look at our escargot. It's huge.
Like the Big Mac.
Yes.
Barbecue sauce on it.
Snail, we'll give you some snail, baby.
Right.
Ugh.
What? You want to eat that pansy French escargot? Now we've got American escargot.
Oh boy. So I have a question for Abby Lee, which is, we've talked a lot about the real history of the redneck, and you're talking about a need for a redneck revolution. The question is, how does such a thing come about? What part can people play? And, is there even a part for people who aren't of the culture? Is this how do you actually get this ball rolling when the modern definition of redneck is so deeply ingrained both within and outside of that culture?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple of steps. The first starts with educating ourselves. I think I said it in the essay, but Road to Blair Mountain is a great place to start. You cannot divorce yourself from this white nationalist rhetoric if you don't know that to a certain degree, white nationalists bastardize hillbilly history, and it might as well verge on cultural appropriation. You cannot fly the Confederate flag and say that you're a redneck. You just can't. The two are incongruous. So you owe it to yourself to pick up a book and start learning about redneck history. Charles Keeney is an excellent example. I also would invest in reading your local publications. If you look at publications like here, we have the Tennessee Lookout, which I write for and which I love, and we do try to cover the redneck perspective from a really honest and truthful place. The other thing I want to say is that I think anybody who's working class, who cares about other working class people, can be considered a redneck. Like, if that's a part of your culture that you feel like you want to claim and you want to say that you're a redneck, I think all it really takes is being a working class person who cares about other working class people. And like we were saying earlier, that's not a geographic thing. Most people in America are working class, particularly if you live in rural areas, but also if you live in urban areas. There's no reason why you can't claim that for yourself. Because to those miners, it wasn't about living in West Virginia. It was about their shared experiences of working in a really harrowing environment and understanding that to literally save their own lives, they had to come together and face off against the coal companies. And that's been the case for other similar working class movements. It's why we have unions of any kind. So if you fall into that category, I think you can call yourself a redneck no matter what. You can educate yourself. And the other thing you can do, like Wrench was saying, is learn about and plug yourself into these smaller local organizations. There still are unions. There still are organizations that advocate for workers' rights. That's a great place to get started. Off the top of my head, we've talked about the Sunrise Movement. We've talked about the Tennessee Holler. Nashville there's also a coal mining organization union here, but I don't remember them off the top of my head. I'd have to look them up. But regardless, wherever you live, there are organizations that need your help. And if you can't find one, guess what? You can start a mutual aid organization yourself. I promise you that one of the quickest ways to gain your neighbor's trust is by providing mutual aid, whether that's having a free coffee in the mornings that people, as they walk by, can stop and get. That's very basic mutual aid. I think it reminds me a lot of what you guys do in talking about the different people and your audiences. We just need to meet somewhere, anywhere. We just need to meet and find out each other's names and shake each other's hand and say, hey, I have neighbors. Like, I know that's a hard thing to remember during the pandemic, and we should be doing that safely, but mutual aid is a great way to remember that you have neighbors and they need your help. We organized for rent relief in my building for several weeks. That's another example of a kind of mutual aid that you can get involved in. And that was just me and some guy. Like, it was me and this dude who lives on the 4th floor. It wasn't a huge organization. It wasn't a union. We just really cared about working class people who were struggling. And that makes you a redneck, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that resonates with me on a sort of a new level in 2020, which is that, you know, I noticed that I actually started meeting a lot more of my neighbors when I was locked down this year with all my shows canceled. It wasn't just that I was home and I was not traveling. I live in a bedroom community for New York, so I'm like in New Jersey, an hour outside the city, and none of my neighbors were really home regularly either. And so now everybody is home more, and that's really led to a lot of opportunities for us to just meet each other. It's not like we jump right to like, hey, we gotta, you know, organize and fight the power. But that kind of making connections and mutual aid. I mean, New Jersey just got walloped with like 3 snowstorms in a row. So we were having conversations about like, hey, can I borrow your snowblower? Hey, you know, this, that, plate of cookies. Thank you so much. And like, these are basic things that I think we might be used to taking for granted, but we really shouldn't necessarily. You know, it's I think in a lot of ways culturally, simple things like erosion of community, just you know, broadly is I think that's something that, like, getting back to those coal mines where like people don't speak the same language or don't talk to each other, that's just something that weakens everybody, and it just leads to sort of a general isolation. So I really appreciate that you said that, because it's, I think any time you make a connection, and I haven't really gotten there with the neighbor with the Trump flag yet. Like, give me a few more months.
I know it takes time.
I'll get there.
Yeah.
I don't have that problem with my neighborhood.
Yeah, well, I do, you know, right across the street, and I, you know, well, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. I keep waiting to see if it'll come down, but but connection, you know, just being able to talk to people at all, I think is a good start.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't do more of it now, but face-to-face is such a powerful way of organizing that is empowering and also so educational just for yourself. Like, in my experience, it's been a huge growing experience whenever I've done things that are face-to-face in terms of block associations and things with your neighbors where you come face-to-face and you get to know people. That's what really starts exploding any stereotypes in your mind, because you start finding out about the things about people that you would never have guessed. based on seeing that person down the street. Oh, I know what they're like. And then you start getting to some meetings together with them, and they start surprising you. And that starts breaking down all of those assumptions, where you start having a more complex idea of who people are instead of just the stereotypes. So neighbor to neighbor is such an important way to be able to get to know people and find out that they're not, what you would assume.
I think the honest to God truth is that national politics, and I think this is the reason why so many people don't vote, is because national politics does not always impact us directly. It does sometimes, but by and large, it's those smaller elected officials, even down to your local sheriff, that really impact your actual daily life in a significant way. And I like what Dan said about mutual aid, because it's not always money. I consider, like, my neighbor across the hallway, sometimes she'll make me cookies, and then when I try a new baking recipe, I'll give her a slice of cake. Like, that counts as mutual aid. It provides community. I love that. I love Chris. She's a wonderful lady, and I'm so glad that she's my neighbor. I saw her in the hallway tonight, and I was like, hey, like, how's it going? That counts as mutual aid just as much as organizing does. Love what you were saying about getting involved with your local community groups. The first time I really experienced mutual aid on a personal level was when the tornado came through Nashville last year on March 3rd. It was right before lockdown. And I was out of power for a week, and my invoices for my writing clients hadn't come through. So I had food in my house, but I couldn't cook any of it. I had no warm food, and I had no power, and it was cold. And I put out like a call for help on Facebook. I was like, hey, in the East Nashville Facebook group, I was like, my building is really struggling. There's several of us here that we can't cook ourselves a warm meal. And within an hour, one of the local restaurants had put together the food that they had left over for that day, and they cooked us this really great jambalaya. And I went and picked it up and brought it back for everybody in our like club room lounge area to eat. And that struck me so deeply, because it was the first time I had ever needed like a food handout, and it felt strange, but that was my beginning of understanding how important mutual aid is. I went to deliver some food from a part of a volunteer effort to a local church, and they were like, hey, you need to stay and eat, because you need to make sure that we want to make sure that you have a proper meal. And that was like the second time I had ever taken a food handout, and it was so strange, but it reminded me that everybody needs help sometimes. And I spent so many hours that week picking up insulation out of my neighbors' yards, and it wasn't even organized. It's going to make me emotional. I don't know why this is so emotional recalling this, but I just got on the sidewalk and walked down the street with a friend, and there were just a group of people hanging out on the corner, and they were like, hey, are you cleaning up? And we were like, yeah. And we walked together to the worst hit neighborhood. There was some guy there with a table, and he was like, take whatever you need. So we grabbed garbage bags and gloves and flashlights, and we got to work, and we were out there for hours just like picking up the insulation, because that was one of our first priorities, because those little pieces of carbon fiber and fiberglass just get blown all over the place. And so that was our, for environmental reasons, top concern. And there was just so much of that week. And I will never forget that. And it's something I've carried with me into the pandemic. So Chris knows that I don't know if it's her husband or her roommate. I haven't asked, it's none of my business, but he is a wheelchair user, and he is also high risk and comorbidity. So because we've done the baked good exchange, she knows that anytime she needs groceries, she just lets me know, and I go pick up his medicine or pick up his groceries. Doesn't cost me a dime. It's not a financial kind of mutual aid, but it has benefited my life. And the lessons I learned during that tornado, man, I will never let them go. And I will always try to show up for my neighbors, because everybody needs help sometimes.
Word up.
Here.
That's an excellent note to lift off on. Abby, what a pleasure it's been to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys know that I love your work. I love what you do. So when Dan asked me, I was like, hell yeah, man. Tell me when, tell me where. I'll be there.
Yeah,
the feelings.
We're a big fan of your work too, Abby Lee.
I just thought it was really important that we could have somebody on to talk about giant snails.
Yeah.
Drunken snails.
I will tell my manager to continue the giant land snail narrative, and that is the press releases that we'll be putting out from now on.
Oh.
I can honestly
Especially-
say it's not. I didn't ask you on because of your hedgehog. I had forgotten that you had a hedgehog. But if I'd remembered, it would totally have been because of that hedgehog. I love
Doodle
that.
has already forgotten you as well because she likes and appreciates no one.
Damn. Oh, that's. You know what? I'll have to accept that. I'll have to accept that because
Tolerates me
Love-
at best.
love hedgehogs so much.
Oh my god.
All right.
All right. Yeah, amazing talk. Thanks everybody for tuning in once again, hanging out with Gangstagrass on your Friday night, and our amazing special guests. So we will be back. We got a little bit of dance party tomorrow afternoon.
That's right.
At
3
3 p.m. tomorrow.
3 p.m. Eastern time. That's 8 p.m. if you're over in the UK. Noon if you are on the Pacific Coast. And Delia's gonna do something Valentine romantic-y with his time. And also want to throw out that we've got Folk Alliance coming up. So,
Yes, we do.
Got a couple of showcases at Folk Alliance. Got the Brooklyn Americana. Got Music to Life. We've got the Philly Folk Fest coming up too. So
Cabin Fever Fest.
that's right, Cabin Fever, Philly Folk. So go to folk.org and you can register for Folk Alliance for the conference if you want. It's pretty cool. And if you do that, it's just going to be a ton of music. There's going to be so many showcases for days. So if you want to get into that, Gangstagrass has 2 showcases. There's a bunch of other great artists, Saul Paul, friend of the band, and a bunch of great folks. So folk.org, you too can come to Folk Alliance and check it out.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see you two at Folk Alliance. That'll be interesting.
Good one.
All right, see you next time, folks.
Right.
Adios,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.